Hey everyone, this is Chris.
And Lorenzo.
And welcome to our Best of Saturday series. Now that we have hundreds of episodes, we get a lot of listeners asking us where to start.
So we'll be selecting some of our most popular episodes to share each Saturday from our years of podcasting. We hope you enjoy it.
No role plays, just real. Chris and Lorenzo share 4 decades of combined experience to help you become a more effective leader.
We've never really, as a workforce, spent a lot of time on making sure we're developing good leaders.
We'll be able to share stories, experience, mistakes, failures, successes.
This is Hacking Your Leadership.
Welcome to Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Chris.
And I'm Lorenzo.
And Lorenzo, I was recently at one of my clients for my consulting business, and they are a medium-sized retail organization with about 3,000 employees. And they made a passing comment to me that they were about to issue bonuses for the quarter, and how they were really excited that 2 out of the 3 disciplines of managers predominantly got their bonuses. And I said, well, what do you mean 2 out of the 3 disciplines? And they said, well, we have a sales manager, and we have an operations manager, and we have like an inventory type manager. Mm-hmm. And he said that the sales manager and the inventory managers were bonusing this time, or for this quarter, mostly for some exceptions, but for the most part, the operations managers were the only ones that mostly didn't get their bonuses. And I said, why did 2 get them and 1 not? And they said, well, the operations managers, they didn't hit their labor goals, so they didn't bonus. Whereas the sales managers, for the most part, hit their revenue goals, and the inventory people, in terms of what they lost for shrink and for inventory integrity, that those were spot on. So they mostly made their bonuses. Mm-hmm. And I had like this flashback to the days of being a Best Buy computer supervisor, walking into the store for a closing shift, and the first thing I would do is walk over to the schedule, for the manager schedule, and see what manager was closing that night. Because I knew that if it was the sales manager closing, I was going to be asked to stay late and to keep my people late. And if it was the operations manager closing, I was going to be asked to send my people home early and get out of there as quickly as I could. and obviously it was because the sales manager was bonused on revenue, and they wanted to make sure every single customer was taken care of. The operations manager was bonused on labor, and they wanted to cut labor wherever they could. And I remember just kind of rolling my eyes when that would happen, and never really thought about much why that was happening. But what was happening was that neither manager was taking into account what was good for the business. They were just doing what was best for themselves. and I think what happens in a situation like that is you're creating competing agendas for the different people on a team, who are then incentivized to work against each other as opposed to for each other. And I'm wondering, have you seen that in your history, and do you have scars from that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it's there's a lot of things that are battling priorities in business, specific to that example of always kind of a sales and ops thing in the retail world. But I'm sure other companies, other industries, similar things, whether it's marketing versus sales, or advertising versus sales, or like inventory control or logistics, like that type of thing. Like there's always the situations where doing more work on one side causes loss or causes a negative impact on the other side. But I think the scars that I can think of are a result from even more tactical is when you have, like, outside of aligning bonuses, because this is all about alignment, right? Outside of aligning bonuses, I think of just leadership teams in general, and the frustration that's caused for employees when you have leaders that are just misaligned in general. So outside of the pushing one agenda over another, I can remember very specifically times when I would be asked to do something by a leader, and I'm like, yeah, sure. Like, what do you want me to do? Like, go ahead and fix this or change this around. You got it. And start working on it. I'm probably halfway done. I'm feeling pretty good. I'm being productive. And then another leader walks up and says, oh, what are you doing? Well, I'm fixing this, or I'm doing that. And they're like, well, wait a minute. You should do it this way, or you should do it that way. And the first thought that comes into your brain as an employee is like, what the hell's going on here? Like, can we get on the same page? It's like so and so just told me to do it that way, and now you're telling me to do it this way, and you're both leaders. Like, do you guys have each other's phone numbers? Like, can you talk? Like, I know you walk by each other many times on the way to get coffee. Maybe on one of those coffee trips, you could just mention to the other person, hey, let's make sure we're telling our employees the same thing, right? So, like, I think alignment, is a major either thing that's great for your team and it really helps to bring people together and make them feel empowered, or it's a major detriment to teamwork and overall culture.
Yeah, the example of bringing up the bonus structure is relevant from a standpoint of, it's typically when it starts affecting the bottom line, when it starts affecting people's own individual wallets, that things start to come to a head, or that people start to feel that there's an incentive to change things, even if they have whether or not they have the ability to. The general daily eye rolling that happens when you hear two different things from two different managers, that's annoying. But it doesn't hit people like looking at a coworker who is supposed to be on the same team as you and you're supposed to be working towards the same goals, and seeing them get a bonus while you do not. And so that's why I brought that example in terms of that's kind of when people that's kind of when it can impact engagement the most, is when you start incentivizing monetarily different outcomes from different leaders. But you're spot on when it comes to just asking people to do different things. If I'm an employee and I'm being asked to do multiple things, even if they're both technically right, just the knowledge that there isn't alignment from a leadership team, that eats away at engagement and at buy-in, because it says that if I'm an employee, it says to me, my leaders don't care enough about me to even talk to each other beforehand. They each they each think that they are steering the ship alone. They don't understand that there's multiple things, and when it's made even worse, I think, when whoever the second manager is comes and says, do this, and the employee says, I was just told to do this, 15 minutes ago by so-and-so. And the second manager says, no, don't do that. Do this.
Right.
At the very least, you could hope that second manager would be like, oh, I apologize. I didn't know you were already told to do something. Yes, continue doing that. I'll go talk to them and we'll figure something else out. Sometimes a lack of communication happens in a fast moving environment, and things can happen. But when peers start to override each other in terms of prioritizing what they want to get done for that employee, that's when you start to see serious problems.
Absolutely. And I think too, I think leveling up a little bit. So as a leader, I've been in many situations where the company is asking, for performance in completely opposite types of metrics or measurables. So as an example, I know we spent some time, I think in episode 2 talking about, close rate and that whole thing, right? And the fun that happens with trying to pull the lever on a certain metric. But very specifically, I remember as a leader having two battling priorities where one was close rate, like making sure that people are buying things as often as possible and as many as possible. And then we were also measuring at the same exact time what they would call margin erosion, which is the amount of discounting that you do to sell things. So like sometimes you have products that are, open box, or they're on clearance, or people are buying a lot of things and you want to make them a deal. But the company was at the same exact time saying, look, we want people that walk in to buy something. And then the next message was, don't discount things to sell people things today, right? It was like one or the other. And I think that, it was difficult because they were so opposite, but that was really kind of the challenge of leadership and bringing an entire team together, is explaining that, first of all, as leaders, we have the responsibility to do both. Secondly, the way that we can try to accomplish this is making sure that we are completely aligned on our strategy and how we're approaching this work. So first and foremost, create an environment that is positive, that's engaging, and that is making sure that our customers are happy and they're getting all the answers they want, and we're informed, and we're making an easy process for them. And by doing that, in theory, they should buy more things more often. But on the other side, let's not break products by accident in the warehouse. Let's not let people double dip on, promotions. Like it's kind of one or the other, whatever makes more sense. Let's not quote the wrong price and then have to then, make that up by giving them the lower price because we were wrong. So we have to be really, really aligned on this strategy and communicate to our teams effectively and then do the same exact behaviors when these scenarios happen. Because when we don't, that causes confusion, that causes mistakes, that causes us to lose in either or sometimes both of those categories.
Sure. Well, so first of all, it is the job of a leader to be able to juggle and balance potentially competing priorities. At a macro level, the biggest one is the employee experience, the customer experience, and the profitability of the organization. Those are competing. You can say all you want to that, one is more important than the other. But if that were really the case, you go out of business. You have to have all three on a macro level. Each decision you make will prioritize one over the other. But as a whole, they are all three equally important. They have to be. So when you talk about competing priorities, that's the job of a leader. The problem happens when you have competing priorities from different managers on the same team, different leaders on the same team. So if the leadership group comes to you to their team as a whole and says, close rate is a problem and margin erosion is a problem, and we need to make sure that we're taking into account both when we make our daily decisions, and you go through process of how to do both, that's great. But when one manager is saying close rate, and someone else is saying margin erosion, that's when the problem happens, because each stance doesn't take into account that the other will cause less of a result to occur on the one that they're going for. So I think what it comes down to is, and you said it perfectly just now, it comes down to behaviors as opposed to results. So if you're trying to cut margin erosion, it doesn't mean make sure that everything you sell is at full price. It means make sure that you aren't eroding margin in areas that are complete faux pas. Like the wrong quote or price matching a Chinese company that has to ship overseas and the product is half the price, but they charge $1,000 to ship it. There are things you can do to avoid the margin erosion that you shouldn't have happen. But if you're measuring whether or not you were successful on margin erosion based simply on the number on the bottom line, how much money was discounted, then that's terrible leadership, because you're not taking into account whether people did the right actions or whether you're just looking for a result.
Right, absolutely. So let me ask you in kind of your, initial comments and example that you had with this company. So I know it probably is obvious, but what's the solve to that? How do you make sure as a company that people are focused on the tactical specific things in regards to the different areas of the business, but at the same exact time, pushing forward so that everybody gets a bonus at the end of the quarter when the company does well, versus an element like this where only 2 of the 3 did?
Well, so first of all, you can hold people accountable to their job completely outside of any type of incentive or bonus program. Holding people accountable to their job has to do with saying these are the behaviors, these are the results we're looking for, and this is what you're responsible for, and you have an annual review, and we have monthly or weekly or quarterly check-ins, or all 3 if it's necessary, or if the employee asks for them. But you can move the metric on the behaviors and the results of an individual person that way without assigning a monetary result to it outside of maybe their annual increase. Maybe it's higher or lower based on their results. When it comes to an incentive program or a bonus program, the team has to win together or lose together. So if you are a leader of people, you need to make sure that your people bonus or get whatever that extra incentive is, either together, they all win together, or they all lose together. And what that does is it incentivizes them to become aware on their own. This isn't something you should have to teach them as a leader. They should become aware on their own of the priorities of the individual positions so that they can do what they can to help. It doesn't mean they need to be an expert in it. It doesn't mean that the sales manager needs to know the scheduling and labor system like the back of their hand the same way the operations manager does. It just means keeping in the back of their mind that if it seems like it's busy, do I need to call people in right now? Or can I just ask my people who are already here to stretch themselves for an hour because I know it's going to die down after this little bit of a rush? Or do I really need to call in the forces knowing that it's going to cost a lot of money? It's just a matter of keeping those things in the back of your mind when it comes to what other people are incentivized by. That's how you get a team to win together.
Yeah, no, and it reminded me of a time when, the bonus structure and the pay structure that I was that I was responsible for and being held accountable for, was around P&Ls and was around net operating profit, right? And what ended up happening when that shift happened to, instead of having these individual metrics that we were looking at, we looked at the bigger picture, we looked at the profitability of the store. All of the sudden, the conversations went from how do we pull this lever to how do we leverage our strengths as a team, as a store, in this area, and then how do we lessen our opportunities? And as an example of that, one of the things that I recall very quickly, and I had some really smart people on the team, what we were talking about, earlier, like clearance products and damaged products, open box products, was something that you would call end of life. So end of life products were things that you were no longer selling. If they were a computer, it was probably 4 weeks old. If it was an appliance, it might have been 4 months old. But these were products that just had to go. And what we discovered was that when your store was charged for the EOL charge on your profit and loss statement, it was actually based on a percentage of how much of that inventory was in your store. And so what we realized was it was smarter for us to just get rid of that inventory and have great sales and take the loss up front when it came to margin, but just get rid of the product. Because at the end of the month, when they calculated that charge back onto the P&L, it was very low or nothing. And that charge, because of the way that it was done, could have been thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars if we held on to all that inventory. So while we may have sold all of it and we took a loss of, let's say, $2,000, the charge, if we would have held it, would have been $4,000 this month, and it would have been another charge the next month. And so all of a sudden, the game was take the least amount of charge wherever it is, and let's be as profitable as possible. And we did that as a team, and magically that's exactly what happened, was we became really, really good at it, and we were able to, increase the profitability of the store and increase the ability for us to bonus, and it was great for everybody.
Right, but in that same situation, take away the P&L, take away the profit and loss altogether, and just give that scorecard of margin erosion. And now you end up with an actual incentive to lose money.
Right.
An incentive as a manager to cause the company to lose money so that individually you can look good on whatever line item on that P&L looks good for you.
Yep.
And when you start looking at the big picture for everybody, no matter how much you want to move money from line A to line B, at the very, very bottom, it's all going to come out to be the exact same thing. So so it's not just, you don't just end up with better profitability, you end up with better productivity too, because the amount of effort and time and intelligence spent by people who they're basically, one of their jobs is to figure out how to move money from one column to another in order to make that one line look better. Now they can just forget about it. Now it doesn't matter. So just focus on the bottom. Now, that doesn't mean that the individual lines don't matter. It just means that you shouldn't tie a monetary incentive to them. Right. The monetary incentive should be to the bottom line, and then you can hold people accountable to behaviors on the individual lines. But that's very different.
Yep, I completely agree. And with that, it's time for this episode's 1 Minute Hack.
The 1 Minute Hack.
Okay, for today's 1 Minute Hack, if you're a leader of people, you need to make sure that whatever incentive or bonus structure you have in place for your people allows them to win as a team or lose as a team. So don't create different incentives for different people. If you have several people reporting to you, make sure that whatever that bottom line number is that you're looking to move, or several numbers is fine, but make sure they're the same for every single person. Make sure that the price of admission those things where you have to be at a minimum of this in order to bonus at all, make sure that those are the same for every person, because that incentivizes each member of your team to work together, to get to know each other's business and figure out how they can positively impact each other, because they're not all going to be around at the same time. At some point, each of them is going to be responsible for the whole business, because that's the nature of the business. So incentivize them to work together as opposed to working apart and silo themselves. And what you'll do is you'll increase overall profitability.
I think that's a great 1-minute hack, and I think it also allows you as a leader of people to develop people to understand the bigger picture. And as we said in episode 2, get over the behaviors of making the metric more important than the bigger picture, and allow them to be successful leaders as they continue their careers.
Yeah, I think that's completely true. And they're skills they can take with them regardless of where they work and where they move. It's the right thing to do.
Absolutely. And with that, we come to the end of another episode. This is Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Lorenzo.
And I'm Chris.
And we'll talk to you guys next time.